All right, this is 8.2 homework. I'm just going to do number 7 and then number 10 through 15. It is the quadratic formula. So number 7 asks us to use the quadratic formula to solve the equation m squared minus 5m minus 14 equals 0. So what you want to do is you want to make sure it's set equal to 0. You want to find a, b, and c. And then you're just going to plug those into the following formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So all of that's under the radical. Whatever your a, b, and c here are, go in here. So a is the number in front of the variable squared. So that's just a 1. It's 1m squared. B is a negative 5 because there is a negative 5 in front of the variable in its linear form. And then c is your constant. In this case, it's negative 14. Okay. If you want to just factor this regularly, you are welcome to do so. If you were to factor it regularly, it would just be, I wanted to draw an x, but it's actually an m, right? M squared. So then our two binomials are just going to be m times m. And then you want a number that will multiply to equal negative 14, but that will add to equal negative 5, right? If you're multiplying to equal negative 14, it might be you're adding to equal a negative, so you want your bigger of the two terms to also be negative. So if it would be like a negative 14, positive 1, when you multiply those, you get a negative 14. You could also go 2 and negative 7. I think those are all the factors, right? Because this, if you add negative 14 plus 1, you get negative 13. Negative 7 plus 2, you get a negative 5. And then the reason I made the bigger numbers the negatives is because this is going to give you a positive number, and you don't want a positive, you want a negative. So positive 7, negative 2 would give you a positive 5. So you see that the one that adds up to a negative 5 is the negative 7, positive 2. So that goes here. M minus 7, M plus 2 equals 0. You're not done. Now you have to say m minus 7 is 0 and m plus 2 is 0. Now subtract, or sorry, add the 7 to solve for m. M is 7, subtract the 2, m is negative 2. So you're welcome to factor it if you would like, or use the quadratic formula. Oftentimes you won't get a whole number as your answer, so you'll need to use the quadratic formula. So let's plug in a, b, and c to this equation. And it wouldn't really be x this time, it would be m, but it doesn't matter. So m equals negative b. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 14. Okay, so that was b. That was b squared. 4, that was a, and that was c. Over 2 times a, and our a was just 1. Now we're just doing algebra. So now it is m equals negative minus a negative 5, right? Negative 5 is positive 5. 5 plus or minus the square root, negative 5 squared. Put it in your calculator. 25. Minus, sorry, negative 4. I like to combine it with negative 4 times 1 times negative 14. So it wouldn't really be minus. It would be plus 56. If you wrote the minus there, then you would have to say minus, and then that would be 4 times 1 times negative 14, right? So minus a negative 56 would be a positive 56. So I like to multiply that as though it's a -4. And then whatever sign I get at the end is the sign I use. Divided by 2 times 1 is just 2, right? So now let's add 25 plus 56 is 81. So now I have m equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2. Good. This you can't simplify. This you can't simplify, but the radical you can simplify. So that becomes 5 plus or minus the square root of 81 is 9 over 2. Now we break it into two different equations, one for the plus 9, one for the minus 9. So now it is m is 5 plus 9 over 2, and m is 5 minus 9 over 2 for the plus and the minus. 5 plus 9, 14 divided by 2 is 7. Good. That becomes 7. 5 minus 9, -4 divided by 2 is a -2. So m equals 7 and m equals -2. That's for number 7. Now we're going to go on to number 10. Number 10, I have the answers right below it. So you're going to see that this one does require the quadratic formula. I can't use factoring because I don't have whole number answers or even really simple fraction answers. Okay, 10 says use the quadratic formula to solve the equation x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. So our first step is set it equal to 0 and put it in descending order. It's already in descending order and set equal to 0. So now what is A, what is B, and what is C? A is just the number 1. There's 1x squared. B is a -1 because there is negative x's. And C is also -1 because it's a -1 as our constant. Let's put it into x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. -1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -1 over 2 times 1. -1 is a +1, plus or minus the square root -1 squared. You're welcome to put it into your calculator just to make sure. -1 squared is 1. -4 times 1 times -1. 4. So 1 plus 4 over 2 times 1 is 2. Now I have x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. Good. The square root of 5, what I want you to do, last time it was 81, right? And 81 is a perfect square, it becomes 9. Anything else that's not a perfect square, square root of 5, it doesn't come out as a whole number. What I want you to do is I want you to take that 5 and make sure there are no numbers you can simplify 5 to. 5 is 5 times 1, right? It's not 4 times 3. There are no factors of 5 except 5 and 1. It's already prime, so you don't have to do anything. There's nothing you can do to the square root of 5. Now we have x equals 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2, and x equals 1 minus the square root of 5 over 2. And if you notice, those are our two answers. That's as far as you can go. Sometimes, let me see if I see any. Not really. Sometimes you can divide them out and you can say, maybe simplify one part of the fraction. So another way to write this that's not wrong, but that doesn't really change anything is 1/2 plus the square root of 5/2. And this one would be x equals 1/2 minus the square root of 5/2. It doesn't change the value. It's just a different way to write it. And sometimes that can help you to see something that you can further simplify. But that doesn't show up here, right? These all remain one fraction. The denominator is over the whole thing. So that's not something to worry about for 8.2 homework. Let's look at number 11. 11 is, so here we have an answer that's just under a square root because it's positive. Here, we're going to find an answer that has an imaginary part because we can take what is under the square root, even though it's negative, we can take it out of the square root. So let's see number 11, how that's different from number 10. X squared plus 2x plus 5 equals 0. Again, we already have it in order. We already have it in order. We know that A is 1, B is a positive 2, and C is 5. So now just carefully enter that into your equation. X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5 over 2 times 1. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared is 4. 4 times 1 times 5. Negative 4 times 1 times a positive 5 is a negative 20. So it's 4 minus 20 over 2 times 1 is just 2. Keep simplifying it. Negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus 20. So I'm going to get a negative number, right? 4 minus 20 is a negative 16 over 2. Now, what you need to do is you need to remember 7.7. 7.7 was all about taking something like a square root of negative 16 and transforming that into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. The square root of negative 1 becomes I. The square root of 16 becomes 4, right? So negative 1 is the I, 16 is the 4. Negative square root of negative 16 is 4I. Okay? So that is now 4I negative 2 plus or minus 4I over 2. Here is a situation where you want to now simplify. Negative 2 divided by 2 plus or minus 4I divided by 2. I want you to take the negative 2 divided by 2. Negative 1, right? Because 2 divided by 2 is 1. One of the 2's is negative, so now it's a negative 1. 4, ignore the I. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we have negative 1 plus or minus 2 times that I. Now, all you have to do is say, there are 2 different answers to that. Negative 1 plus 2I, and x equals negative 1 minus 2I. Done. Okay. So here we have negative, the square root of negative 16. We know from practicing in 7.7 that the square root of negative 16 is 4I. Replace that with 4I. Make sure you can't divide this, the top by the bottom, right? Simplify the fraction. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and we're multiplying it by that I. Okay, because another way to write 4i divided by 2 is 4 divided by 2i. Okay. If the term is on the top, you can put it out to the front or the back. We're taking that 4 divided by 2 and we're multiplying it by I. It becomes 2i. All right, that is number 11. Let's go on to 12. 12 is 7m squared plus 2m equals 4. Good. First thing we want to do, put it in descending order, but make sure it's set equal to 0. This is not currently set equal to 0. I need to subtract the 4. Good. So now I have 7m squared plus 2m minus 4 is 0. Now I can find my A is 7, B is positive 2, C is negative 4. M, I'm gonna write X, M equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. M equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 4 over 2 times 7. M is negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared. We know that one, right? 4. Negative 4 times 7 times negative 4. 112. Over 2 times 7 is 14, right? Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 112, 116 over 14. Okay, so 116, you want to see if you can simplify it. You can either just start dividing it by small numbers, right? 116, I can divide it by 4, right? Because 4 is a perfect square. Or you can take 116 and divide it by every perfect square you know. Let's talk about what the perfect squares are. The perfect squares are a number times itself. So 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36, sorry. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. 9 squared is 81. 10 squared is 100. Right? So if you want, you can take 116 and divide it by each of these to find out what perfect square comes out. 116 divided by 100, for example. All right? No. 116 divided by 81. No. 116 divided by 64. No. 116 divided by 49. No. 116 divided by 36. No. 25. No. 16. No. 9. No. So it turns out it was 4. It's only 4. It's 4 times 29. That does look tedious, but that's going to give you the fastest pairing because I could have, right? So I did all of that so that I could find 4. 4 is 2 times 2, right? So that comes out as 2. 4 is 2 squared. Square root 29. Okay. The other way to do it would be the square root of 116 is, what's the smallest number I can divide it by? 2, right? 2 times 58. And then I have to take 58. 2 stays the same. 58, divide it by 2, or divide it by anything, right? 29. 2 times 29. Now I have the two 2's, square root 29. So whichever of those looks faster depending on what number you have. Okay, those are both fine ways to do it. Basically what happens is that square root of 116 we decided is 2 square root 29. Good. So we're just replacing that. Everything else is the same. So we still have m equals -2 plus or minus. Didn't line that up well. 2 square root 29 over 14. M equals, now let's divide it all by 2 like we did here, okay? -2 divided by 2 becomes -1. 4 divided by 2 becomes 2i. Let's do that here. -2 over 14 plus or minus 2 square root 29 over 14. -2 divided by 14. It's a negative. 2 is prime, right? But let's put 14 into its prime factorization. It's a 2 and it's a 7, right? 2 times 7 is 14, plus or minus 2 square root 29 over 2 times 7. Okay, what happens now is there's a 2 on the top, there's a 2 on the bottom. There's a 2 on the top, there's a 2 on the bottom. I can cancel those. So this becomes, there's nothing up here now, right? -1. It was a negative, now it's a -1 on the 7 on the bottom. -2 14ths is the same as -1 7th. You can check it. Good. Plus or minus the square root of 29 over 7. So that 2 and that 2 went away, so it's just the square root of 29. So that means we have m equals -1 plus square root of 29 over 7, and m equals -1 minus the square root of 29 over 7. Good. That's number 12. So on to 13. Thirteen is -8 equals 3x squared minus 5x. All right, again, I want everything on one side, and I like my first term to be positive, so I'm going to add 8. When I add 8 to both sides, I get 0 equals 3x squared minus 5x plus 8. Good. I know that A is now 3, B is now -5, and C is +8. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a -5 plus or minus the square root of -5 squared, important to keep that in the parentheses, minus 4 times 3 times 8, all over 2 times 3. Minus a -5 is going to be a +5, plus or minus the square root of -5, or sorry, the square of -5 is 25. -4 times 3 times 8. So we're combining with -4 times 3 times 8. -96 over 2 times 3 is 6. Let's subtract 25 minus 96. We get negative 71. X equals 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 71 over 6. Okay? Now, take negative 71 and put it into its simplest form. The square root of negative 71. If you ever have a negative, the first thing you should do, if we're talking about imaginary numbers, is make it into negative 1 times the positive of that number. So that's negative 1 times positive 71. The negative 1 becomes I. So we just have I square root 71. Is there anything you can divide 71 by? 71 can be, right? 71 divided by 3. Nope. 4. Nope. It's not going to be any even number, right? 5. No. 7. No. 9. No. So just make sure it's a prime number. It can't be divided by anything. Okay. It looks like there is no number I can take out of 71. So this is just going to become x equals 5 plus or minus, instead of the square root of negative 71, we have I square root positive 71. So at least we made the radical positive over 6. That's as far as you can take it. 5 divided by 6 can't be simplified. There's nothing to simplify on this side. So we just have x equals 5 plus I square root 71 over 6. X equals 5 minus I square root 71 over 6. That is number 13. Try number 14. 14 is 4m squared plus 7m equals 6. Again, let's move that 6 over. We get 4m squared plus 7m minus 6 equals 0. You can see we're going to have a big number under the radical there. That's okay. A is 4, B is 7, C is negative 6. So we have m equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times negative 6 over 2 times 4. Negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared is 49. Negative 4 times negative 6. 96. So it's a positive because we multiplied a negative times a negative. 8. 49 plus 96. So I'm just adding, I'm just adding the two terms inside the radical and I get 145. Negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 145 over 8. So now when we're simplifying, I think we can see with the answer key that it remains 145. But as your numbers get bigger, the most efficient thing we saw, so we saw with 71, right? I didn't fully finish that. I was just kind of randomly going through to make sure there was nothing divisible by it. But the best thing to do is to take all your list of perfect squares and check all of them until you get to a number bigger than that number. So again, 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. 9 squared is 81. 10 squared is 100. 11 squared is 121. Good. 12 squared is 144. So that's not going to apply. But just take, so 71, the smallest number is 64. Just say 71 divided by 64. Right? What's our next one? 71 divided by 49. Nope. 71 divided by 36. 71 divided by 25, of course not. 71 divided by 16. 71 divided by 9. 71 divided by 4. Okay, just check all of them, make sure none of them fit. Same with 145. 145, now start at 121. 125 divided by 100. 125 divided by 81. 125 divided, oh, sorry, it's 145. 145 divided by 81. 64. 49. 36. 25. Seems like that one might work. Nope. 16. 9. And it's not going to be 4, right? Because 4 is even and that number is odd. So we've checked every number. There's nothing you can factor out of the square root of 145. So you are done. So your final answer is m is -7 plus the square root of 145 over 8. And m is -7 minus the square root of 145 over 8. All right, last one. Number 15. 15 is 4x squared minus 3x plus 6 is 0. A is 4, B is -3, C is +6. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2 times 4. Oops, 2 times a. Filling it out. X equals -3 square root -3 squared minus 4 times 4 times 6 over 2 times 4. X equals -3 becomes a +3 plus or minus the square root -3 squared is 9. -4 times 4 times 6 is a -96. So it's 9 minus 96 over 2 times 4 is 8. I wanted to write 4 because I was saying the word 4. X equals 3 plus or minus 9 minus 96, -87. 8. Okay. X equals 3 plus or minus the square root of -87. That's going to become -1 times 87. -1 becomes I square root 87. If we look at all of our perfect squares, 87 divided by 64, no. 87 divided by 49, no. And you can keep going just to make sure. 36, 25, 16, 9, 4. Okay, there's no way to factor 87, so it's just 3 plus or minus 3 plus or minus I square root 87 over 8. No way to simplify 3 over 8. No way to simplify I over 8. So it's just going to be x equals 3 plus I square root 87 over 8. X equals 3 minus I square root 87 over 8.